Before we begin, I want to let you know that in this episode, we talk about Canada's Indian residential schools. If you're a survivor or an intergenerational survivor of residential schools, this may be especially difficult to hear. And just a warning to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, this episode contains the names and voices of people who have died. Please take care while listening. I've been listening through our CBC archives, and there's this one clip from 1962 that's been on my mind.
Rabbits are not supposed to bite. If a rabbit ever bites you, it means long life. And the rabbit bit me here in my hand. And the next time a rabbit bit me twice, was that mean to say I'm going to live 2 lives?
Norval says that rabbits aren't supposed to bite, that if a rabbit bites you, it means you'll live a long life. And then he says that a rabbit bit him, and then again, twice. He asks, does that mean I'm going to live 2 lives?
2 lives? 2 lives? 2 lives? 2 lives?
Norval lived a complicated life, a life full of color and art. And then he died. And now, his name is sort of having a second life. Spreading through the art market through fake paintings coming from Gary Lamont. And this shadow life, this second life, it just goes on and on. Because Gary Lamont wasn't alone. From CBC in Canada and ABC in Australia, this is Forged. Episode 5, Under the Paint.
Well, it's snowing, blowing snow. It's actually not too cold today. It's -10, but it's blowing snow, and we had another good little dump of snow last night. So this actually is not...
It's February in Thunder Bay, and I'm sitting in the front seat of Inspector Jason Ryback's car. We're bundled up in parkas.
Norval, he actually lived, there was a house right off of Fitzgerald Street that's just up here. It's no longer there. It's a parking lot now, but Norval lived up in this area.
Jason was one of the lead officers investigating the Norval Morriseau art fraud rings. He's driving us around, pointing out places that were key in building their case.
Yeah, and Norval spent time in the south. We'll go by in Fort William. I'll take you by where some of the old police officers talked about remembering Norval hanging out, giving away paintings and stuff like that for money.
Interesting.
Yeah, and certainly, them being as close to the city, they have access to electricity. And if I didn't tell you where we were, you wouldn't necessarily know we were on a First Nation community, right?
Except when we just turned and I looked down, I saw a res dog.
Oh, did you see?
Yeah, he was running down the street over there. I said, oh yeah, we're on a First Nation, there's a dog.
So this is kind of their industrial, like their...
The res is so close to the city here, right on its edge. And driving these Thunder Bay streets, many of the places that Jason points out are so familiar to me now.
So we're beside Painted Turtle, of course.
Oh yes, okay.
That's Lorraine Cull's art shop, the one that supplied a ton of paint and canvases to Gary Lamont.
Yeah, so the Painted Turtle is right there, and Gary lived on Gordon Avenue, which is right here.
And then Jason pulls over.
We're on Gordon Avenue, which was a house that was when Gary Lamont's group was painting. Dallas Thompson, they all stayed here. This is where some of the paintings were produced, were in this house. Obviously a house of horrors to some of the people the stuff that went on there for them.
Jason's investigation started with trying to solve the murder of Scott Dove, a teenager from Thunder Bay.
Scott was murdered in 1984 and has been an active investigation within our police service since then.
Scott was the middle child in the Dove family. He was a competitive swimmer and a diver. The last morning he was seen, he had left his family home to go to school. After school, he was going to his part-time job at a local convenience store. But he never made it to school or to his job.
His body was found dumped on the side of a road in a pit, and obviously he had been murdered.
Gary Lamont had been a suspect in the case, but the police could never prove that he'd done it. and they hit a dead end. Jason was still trying to dig up new clues, anything that could help solve the case. He kept in touch with the Dove family.
It was Mrs. Dove who reached out to me to ask me if I'd seen the documentary There Are No Fakes.
In the months leading up to Kevin Hearn's trial, a documentary filmmaker, Jamie Kastner, had been following Kevin and his lawyer around, interviewing people connected to the story, trying to put all the pieces together on film. The documentary is called There Are No Fakes, and in it there's mention of the murder of Scott Dove. That's why Mrs. Dove called Jason.
She called me and said, are you aware of this documentary? And I was like, no. And then we pulled it up and watched it. The hope was we were going to get information to help us solve the murder of Scott Dove. But we started getting all this information on an art fraud that happened. And so I was like, how has nobody ever looked into this? Are the two connected? Like, that's kind of how it started. Is there a connection to the art fraud and the murder? And, when I talked to Jonathan Summer, kind of the floodgates opened, right? That really was talk to Kevin, see what he had learned. Because, we know from a documentary that obviously stuff is not all put in the documentary. Stuff is left on the floor. And at the start of this, our target was Gary Lamont. We eventually got information that he still had paintings and they were in the house. We got a search warrant and executed it. We found paintings, the fake paintings of Norval's in his house. And I think had we gone into Gary's house and not got any paintings, we may have hit a roadblock. But that's not what happened.
They found around 35 paintings in Gary's house.
That really was okay, now what do we do? We just started talking to people, and then people would give us another name, and we'd go talk to that person, and they'd give us more information. It just snowballed. And then it quickly became evident that we were getting to a scale of that we as our police service can't manage this.
Jason wanted to get to the bottom of the frauds, to get evidence to build a case against Gary Lamont. But the case just kept growing.
Our first phone call was to the FBI, right? Because we looked and we're like, okay, nobody in Canada knows how to do art crime. FBI's got a website that says they have an art crime team. And we called the number on the art crime website. And I ended up talking to a special agent out of Los Angeles. And he, for the first month and a half, was basically our guiding light on how to do this. Just, simple stuff like, where do you send a painting to have it analyzed? What are you looking for?
Jason needed all the help he could get. So he reached out to the Ontario Provincial Police, the OPP.
And so we met with the OPP and, they said, yeah, we're in. And they brought in a case manager, Detective Inspector Kevin Veilleux. His background was more from the homicide world. And, we became very close and we became a great team.
We did work a lot of long hours. There was a lot of travel. We'd spend multiple days in motel rooms. We had a project office in Thunder Bay that my team worked out of. So they were there on a daily basis.
This is Kevin Veilleux. Kevin oversaw Jason and the team. And while the team was experienced, art fraud was new territory.
This really was a team of people who've never done art investigations. We all learned every step along the way by using the skill set we had for doing homicide investigations to do an art investigation.
One of the first things the team did was build out a timeline of Norval's life.
Well, when I started, I didn't even know who Norval was other than by name. I knew he was a painter from the area. I couldn't have even picked out a Norval Morriseau painting in an art gallery unless someone told me it was a Norval Morriseau.
But he learned fast.
You had to look at how he painted originally, how that evolved, when he became sick.
This timeline allowed the police to see what Norval was doing and painting, where and when. For 2.5 years, they traveled the country, looked at paintings in private and public collections, and talked to everyone they could.
We thought, if we can talk to everybody alive that we can find that knew Norval, painted with Norval, could tell us about him, his style, what he would have done, that would form part of the evidence for us to show that he didn't paint these. His paintings were important to his culture. They were important to our history. And someone took advantage of them. That's what was important.
Jason and his team started seizing paintings they believed to be fake and analyzing them alongside paintings they knew to be real.
Well, the key one was infrared reflectography, which is basically an X-ray that sees underneath the paint.
What they could see under the paint started to show them how the fraudsters worked.
So we knew that they used pencil to put all the codes on, right? So, boop, there it is, right? Okay, well, that's clearly a fake painting because there's all the symbols. Like we could see all the letters and the coding, and you can see the underdrawings, which was important, right?
It was like paint by numbers.
It was somewhat of an assembly line.
Someone was the orange person, and they would go around and put orange on all the paintings, and somebody was the light green, and somebody was BLTG, B for blue, and that was your role that night, was you were the blue guy. You'd go around, put blue, blue, blue on all the paintings. It was really basic. We saw the coding with the infrared reflectography.
Through their investigation, the cops also traced the path of these fakes. They learned that a lot of the fakes were being sold through 2 auction houses in Ontario.
They would be auctioned and bought by galleries, private people, things like that.
But these fakes were not coming from Gary Lamont. They were being supplied by a man named David Voss. That's right, Norval's work was being forged by 2 different fraud rings. The police uncovered that Gary's ring didn't actually make that many forgeries.
We believe the amount he created was small, like a couple hundred. So it wasn't high. Gary's weren't high, but David's were, we believe is around 4,500.
4,500 fake Norval Morriseau paintings.
David was actually the mastermind of the whole thing, and he created the most of all the fakes.
David Voss lived in Thunder Bay. He worked as a commercial painter.
There was a belief that David Voss wasn't even real. People believed he was a fake person. David Voss became a mythical person in all this.
And that could be potentially how he was able to get away with it for so long, because he wasn't a routine criminal or anything that we dealt with. He flew under the radar and I think was smart about what he did for a long time.
The police started tracing fakes, a lot of them, back to David.
When we went to David Voss's ex-wife's house, her first words out of her mouth were, "We've been waiting 20 years for you to come here."
Jason and his team learned that David Voss's fraud ring had been in operation since 1996. Gary's started 6 years later, in 2002.
That connection between Gary and David was one that we never really could figure out, and that was, I guess, if anything, was the one, like, they had to know each other. How'd they not? We were never able to figure that out.
They didn't figure that out, but they did start making arrests.
I got a text from Jason one morning.
Here's Kevin Hearn again.
He said, "Make sure you watch the news this morning."
The late Norval Morriseau, one of Canada's most beloved artists, and his works have been the target of a long-running fraud.
Thunder Bay Police and OPP announced they'd charged 8 people and seized more than 1,000 paintings after an investigation into fraudulent Norval Morriseau artwork.
Police say a thriving black market produced potentially millions of dollars in forged works.
Police say anyone with concerns about a Morrisseau painting in their collection is advised to contact legal counsel.
The police held a news conference at the OPP's headquarters. Kevin Veilleux stood on a stage behind a podium and spoke about the charges.
On March 1st, we arrested 8 individuals for their alleged involvement in the fraudulent manufacturing and distribution of artwork purported to be that of famed artist Norval Morriseau.
On stage, behind Kevin Veilleux, are 9 paintings, and the one in the center is that dull green, those creatures with jagged teeth. It's spirit energy of Mother Earth, Kevin Hearn's painting.
These are not small, victimless crimes. These are people that took advantage of one man's legacy in order to turn a profit for themselves. Make no mistake, these were coordinated and intentional efforts. These people duped the public and made a profit doing so.
Gary Lamont was in custody when he was charged. He had been arrested for sexual assault. And then in December 2023, in a courtroom in Thunder Bay, Gary pled guilty for his role in producing fake Norval Morriseau paintings. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. In June 2024, David Voss pled guilty to counts of forgery related to an art fraud ring. And Kevin Hearn finally found out where his painting came from.
When David Voss pled guilty in court, they named a few specific paintings that were related to his fraud ring, and my painting was one of them. And so that was clear as day, the truth.
David was sentenced to 5 years in prison. The police also uncovered what they believe is a third art fraud ring, one that was operating out of southern Ontario. On March 1st, 2023, James White was arrested in connection with this ring. The same James, or Jim White, who was an intervener in Kevin Hearn's trial. In June, he pled guilty to creating forged documents and possession and trafficking of forged artworks. He was granted a conditional sentence of 2 years. As part of that guilty plea, James White agreed to a statement of facts. Going back to 1999, James had been a distributor of Norval's works. Back then, James took some steps to authenticate what he bought. But things took a turn in 2016 when he started acquiring works from a man named Jeffrey Cowan. James had come across paintings Jeffrey was selling online. Later, the two began meeting at Jeffrey's house. A number of paintings would be laid out on Jeffrey's garage floor, and James would select the ones he wanted to buy. Some were on paper, some were on wood, others on animal hides. And this seems to be when James stopped asking where the works were coming from. James says he turned a blind eye to any concerns he might have had, and eventually he went as far as hiring a man named David Bremner to create certificates of authenticity and appraisal. David Bremner has now also pled guilty to creating forged documents and being in possession of more than 20 forged paintings which police found inside his home. He was granted a conditional sentence of 2 years. In his statement of facts, David says that he also turned a blind eye to a number of red flags that made him suspicious of the paintings that were coming from Jeffrey Cowan. But David made certificates of authenticity anyway. Jeffrey Cowan's case is still before the court at the time of this recording. In the court documents that detail James and David's role in this fraud ring, there are a lot of images. Flipping through the pages, it's kind of staggering. The works look so clearly wrong to me. Colors that don't look like Norval's. Paintings that just look like blatant knockoffs. And the sheer volume of it, hundreds of pages of forged documents and fake Norval Morriseau artworks. And there are hundreds of fake paintings that are still out there. Many could be hanging in people's homes.
That these places existed in some of the most beautiful landscapes, that I always find that juxtaposition so weird.
It's the middle of February, and the snowbanks are piled high along the sidewalks. I'm walking with my producer down a street where St. Joseph's used to be, the residential school that Norval was forced to attend as a little boy.
And you can imagine at one time these schools being in these beautiful landscapes, these absolutely beautiful landscapes. And I know from experience and also from stories of my own father how they would look out the windows of these schools. And I know my father's situation, very similar to Norval, about 6 years old, longing to go home. My father ran naked from the showers and ran 10 miles home, only to be brought back. And so I can see Norval when in the stories of him running away, the horrors that happened to them and the abuse, physical, psychological, or sexual abuse. It's all there, all the abuses. And I'm always a little shocked how it just all happened without anybody ever saying anything. But you have to know that people knew. People knew what was going on.
Where I live on the Siksika Nation in Alberta, my home is just down the hill from the Old Sun Residential School. The building is still there. My house is on the grounds where the gardens used to be. It's where I'm recording from now. Many of my family members were forced to attend Old Sun. my father, my aunties, my cousins. I attended 3 residential schools. Like Norval, I was sexually abused. But I've gotten support to work through the trauma. I've often thought, if Norval had got support too, maybe things could have turned out differently for him.
This is where it happened, and yes, it's a different time, but the energies of that time are still here, in the Indigenous way. History, as we know, remains. It's like a scar on the earth. It'll always be there.
My father had a very rough life when he was growing up.
This is Eugene Morrisseau again, one of Norval's sons. He lives in Thunder Bay, about a 5-minute drive from where Norval went to residential school.
You have residential school that really buggered up everything, you know what I mean? And for my dad to go through that, I think my dad had it rough, just like everybody that went to residential school.
In so many ways, this story of the fakes started here, at this residential school. The trauma that was inflicted on Norval here, it created these ripples.
When you look at Norval and his life, one thing that became obvious, and even to the end of the frauds, is he was taken advantage of by everybody. That was obvious. You got to go look back at where he came from, right? And his background and his history.
He was an easy target for this based on his lifestyle, that you had people in positions that could take advantage, for lack of a better term, the perfect storm where so many things were in place that could facilitate this. He painted and he'd provide them to people for enough money to buy a loaf of bread, to, buy cigarettes, things like that. He was a very giving man. He loved his art. He knew people loved his art. So he gave a lot away to people who he trusted or befriended. It's no surprise that Norval Morriseau had challenges in his life. He had some substance abuse issues. He was transient with what Norval went through and the ability to continue to paint to the level he did and be that icon in the art community, I think is really, really amazing.
Something else came up when Kevin Hearn was investigating his painting. Some of Norval's family members were alleged to have been involved in the fraud rings.
I think Benji Morrisseau paints the closest to Norval Morriseau out of everybody. His painting and his work is amazing on its own. And I look at some of his paintings and I'm like, that could be a Norval Morriseau painting because he's so talented. And he was actually trained by Norval.
Inspector Jason Ryback again.
We believe Benji was one of the painters for Gary.
Benji, or Benjamin Morrisseau, is Norval's nephew. There was a witness in Kevin Hearn's trial who said they saw Benji copying Norval's paintings from a book that Gary had at the house. That Benji used a photo of a real Norval Morriseau painting as a model for his syllabic signature. That Benji was at Gary's house every few days and closed himself in a small room to do his painting. That he would work there for several hours at a time. Benji faced charges related to Gary's fraud ring, but after completing a restorative justice program with his community, his charges have been since withdrawn. The witness said that Norval's late brother, Wolf Morrisseau, hung around Gary's house and was involved in the fraud ring too. Other allegations have circled. In an ongoing lawsuit, it is being claimed that some of Norval's children may have been involved with the fakes.
Family was certainly aware of what people think. I think the important piece is that you need to understand where they live. You need to understand what their struggles are. You need to understand some of them don't even have drinking water. You got to be really careful on what you're going to say and do about these people because you don't understand what they went through.
We're sitting in Jason's office in Thunder Bay. There's snow lining the parking lot outside his window. I asked him about what I'd been hearing about Norval's family, about some of his children allegedly being involved in the frauds, about them making money off the fakes. Those claims are so far unproven. Jason has some thoughts.
I don't think they truly have an understanding of what those kids in that family went through and are still currently going through. I've been up to their community. I know what their communities are like. I know what the struggles are like. And I don't think these people have a real understanding of what that looks like. When you don't have money to put food on the table, you need to really take a step back and think about it at the end of the day.
Kevin Vayu has been thinking about this too.
Some of these people were taken advantage of. Their situation in life were taken advantage of. And perhaps did they make some bad decisions and were complicit in a minor way? I would agree with that. But I'd also look at the totality of the situation and see the circumstances they were in. And when you're offered something, when you don't have anything, it can be a big determinative on how you proceed. I think people knowingly took advantage of some of the Norval Morriseau family members to move the fraud forward. It's terrible. It's disgusting, and really disgusting in my mind on how people were taken advantage of.
So would you say that the story of the Morrisseau fakes is over?
We believe we've got the most accountable people, the important people that were the precipitators of the fraud held accountable. But I think this is going to go on forever.
We believe there's thousands of fakes still out there.
And this story, it just keeps unraveling. It's taken me all the way to Australia.
Have you ever signed any paintings that you didn't do?
Yeah, I signed him, and because I was really scared. My other people might be turned around to shoot me with a gun.
Shoot you with a gun?
Yeah.
That's on the next episode of Forged. Forged is a co-production of CBC in Canada and ABC in Australia. It was produced by Kyle Musica and showrunner Zoe Tennant. Our contributing reporter is Luke Rinaldi. Additional production support from Rudy Bremer and Anna Marie Harding. Our contributing editor is Phelan Johnson, and our senior producer and story editor is Veronica Simmons. Sound design and original music by Graham MacDonald. Emily Mathieu is our fact checker. Roshni Nair is our coordinating producer. At CBC Podcasts, executive producers are Cecil Fernandez and Chris Oak. Tanya Springer is the senior manager, and Arif Noorani is director. Special thanks to the CBC Indigenous office. At ABC, Calric Martin and Jessica Radburn are executive producers.